It's time again for one of those limited budget challenge things. This video you're watching contains the rules, the shopping, and day one of the cooking. Some of you asked for £3 for 3 days, £7 7 days, £30 30 days, or £365 for a year. But £5 for 5 days opens up some opportunities for economy of scale that aren't possible on a shorter project, at the same time as being manageable for turning into a short series of videos. But because of that economy of scale, £5 for 5 days is a little bit easier than £1 or £2 for 1 or 2 days respectively, so I'll be adjusting the rules a little bit. The benefits of a challenge exercise like this are best realised when the difficulty levels are set at what is sometimes called stretch achievable. Too easy and achievements are meaningless. Too hard and there are no achievements to be made. And the purpose of this exercise is exercise. This isn't about playing poor, and it certainly isn't about trying to preach to people in financial stress. This is something I do in order to provoke myself to be creative. So the rules: £5 for 5 days, that's got to buy all of my food for 14 meals. Not 15 because I plan on shopping early on day 1, Monday, and only eating brunch and dinner on that day. And then with 3 meals, breakfast, lunch and dinner on the remaining 4 days. No scavenging for discarded condiment sachets, no freebies unless they're buy one get one free type of free. No wild food foraging, which, being January, you might think isn't much of a sacrifice, but there are still loads of things out there I could forage. Well, I'll talk about that later. In fact, I still need to get out for exercise, so perhaps we'll play a game of here's what you could have foraged each day. What else? Kitchen facilities such as oven, food processor, fridge, freezer are permitted, and of course the energy to operate them. Water and unlimited salt for cooking and seasoning. Pepper in small amounts as a table spice only. I'm going to be aiming for targets of at least 2,000 calories a day, which is on the low side, but I'm a bit overweight anyway, so I can take it. If I can, 50 grams of protein each day and 5 a day for fruits and veg. I think it might be difficult to hit all of those targets for a fiver, quite honestly. Tea and coffee are permitted, simply because in order for video content to come out, coffee has to go in. That's all I have to say about that. One more thing, I'm going to allow myself 5 small dips into my spice and ingredients cupboard for flavouring elements. Nothing that has any significant food value, so no cups of flour or sugar, no handfuls of raisins, just 5 items from this list which will be randomly picked after the shopping is done. So, let's go shopping, this time starting in Lidl. And it turns out Lidl was a great place to start, as they have these waste not fruit and veg boxes containing an assortment of items that have best before dates about to expire. Supposedly 5 kilos of veg for £1.50. I think my box might have been quite generously filled, but we'll weigh everything up when we get home. Now, as I say, these videos are an exercise to try to develop creativity, but there is one aspect to them that does echo reality, and it's this. When the budget's too small, and I think this is too small, it's necessary to make some choices, and most of those choices will leave something lacking. For example, I could guarantee to fulfill the calorie requirement by just buying white flour and lard. That would meet a sustenance requirement at the severe expense of nutrition, flavour and variety. Alternatively, I could splash out on a couple of nice things like a jar of curry sauce and some chicken portions, and that will make some tasty meals, but not enough of them. Whatever I choose here is going to be a compromise, in which one or more of those factors of sustenance, nutrition, flavour and variety will not be fully met. Also, I was shopping on Monday morning, which is probably the worst possible moment for any other reductions and bargains. Lidl has a whole aisle of reduced to clear stuff, but most of it was snacks and luxuries that are still out of reasonable reach of my budget. I need to add some protein and energy to that lovely box of veg, and also some additional flavour if I can. White flour wins out over pasta and rice simply by virtue of versatility. Lard wins out over butter, oil or margarine simply because it's the cheapest form of fat, and fat is a good source of energy, which my body will burn if I stay active and if the calories are on the low side anyway. I sort of ran out of options in Lidl, so I went on to Aldi, which had similar prices to Lidl on most things, but really nothing that stood out. I went on to Tesco, all 3 of these shops are on the same route anyway. Lentils or chickpeas would be good, and I had hoped on a £5 budget to be able to buy these dry, but the smallest bags still represent a pretty big bite out of the budget, so I went with yellow split peas, which were the cheapest. Tesco had some nicer looking examples of their cooking bacon than last time. 75p for half a kilo. It's cheap because it's all trimmings and misshapes that can't be sold in regular packs, and would have to be discarded as waste if it wasn't sold off cheap like this. But we did bacon last time, so I'll keep looking. Okay, this pack of 20 sausages, pretty low-grade sausages, 42% pork, ingredients on the screen, feel free to hate, but these cost £1, so I'm going with them. A 1 kilo bag of rice for 45p would have been the same price in Lidl or Aldi. The 500 gram packs of spaghetti for 20p might have been more energy per price, but not as versatile as rice, I think. Still need something for flavour. I was going to get one of these little tins of tomato puree, but instead I got a 1 kilo bag of onions, because onions are food energy as well as flavour, more so than tomato puree I think, which leaves me 16 pence in the pot. 2 small bananas. Nope, not these two, too expensive. These two, 15 pence. That's the shopping done. Let's go home. Receipts are on the screen for all of you skeptics out there. For confused Americans, there is no tax on unprepared food in the UK. The taxman gets his pound of flesh via fuel, other retail goods, income tax and so on. Okay, let's have a look at the food haul. Now, the bargain item obviously is this veg box from Lidl. £1.50 for these kind of reduced vegetables. Don't think the challenge would have been possible without this. So, this was £1.50 and it contains a bag of what they call stew pack, which has got an onion, a swede, some carrots, a parsnip. That's good. Lots of variety there. Another swede. You might know that as rutabaga. A pack of carrots, a kilo of carrots, I think that is. Nice little punnet of apricots. Nothing wrong with those. In fact, they are just nicely ripe by the feel of them. Savoy cabbage. Looks perfectly good. A bag of miniature potatoes. Oops. I presume that's reduced because it's split open. So it's got some mini potatoes. Those are a bit slimy. And smell weird. I think there might be one that's gone off inside there. Might have to clean those up and dry them. A pack of 4 baking potatoes, 5 apples, a pack of 2 lettuce, and a mango. Now also from Lidl, 1.5 kilos of self-raising flour. I decided to get self-raising because making leavening out of what I don't have could be tricky. However, making bread out of self-raising, don't know, we'll find out. Maybe soda bread. And a pack of lard, because fat was a problem in previous challenges. In Tesco, we got a 907 gram of 20 pork sausages. 42% meat. They're going to be fatty, low quality sausages, but they've got some protein in them, they've got some fat in them, they'll do. A pack of yellow split peas. The cheapest pulses that were on sale anywhere. There were lentils in other shops, but they were going to break the budget. So I got yellow split peas. Not my favourite, but they'll do. They've got some protein in them. They've got some fibre in them. They're good. 1 kilo pack of rice. Just long grain rice. A 1 kilo bag of onions. Although I already have got 1 onion in there. And then 2 little bananas. And I chose green ones because they'll ripen and I can use them later in the week. Take the stickers off of them because I'm intending to maybe eat the peel as well. I believe you can eat banana peel. Well, somebody told me you can. So we'll look into that and maybe we'll use the peel in something as well. So that's the food haul, and that doesn't look too bad for me. I see possibilities here. I don't know if we've hit the calorie budget, so I'll total that all up, I'll calculate it and I'll put that on the screen now and we'll see what the total calories are in this lot. But I think there's probably enough food here to keep me going. Flour and rice cooks up bigger than obviously you're seeing here. Same thing with these split peas, they swell up when they're cooked, so there's stuff here I can work with. Those sausages have got to go in the freezer now. I'm going to sort out those potatoes because they don't look great. I think there might be something to throw away in there. I'll sort them out. I'll probably have to use them first. So let's have a look and see what's going on with these potatoes. Weird. Something's rotten in there. However, I think the potatoes themselves, and most of them, are going to be completely sound. They just need to be washed and then dried out. It's almost like somebody spilt flour on them. That might be just one rotten potato that's exploded in there, but I can't see it, so maybe they took that out before they put it in the bag there. Anyway, with a thorough wash and a careful dry, these potatoes are okay. I'm going to let them dry out completely and then I'll store them in the fridge, I think, and we'll just make sure we use them first. So some of my vegetables I'm just going to put back in the box and I'll put that downstairs in the garage because that's nice and cool down there and they'll keep fine. Some things needed to go in the fridge. The sausages needed to go in the freezer. There are a few vegetables that I think I must use today because they're going to go off otherwise. There's an onion that's perfectly sound but the skin is damp. There's a carrot that looks a bit iffy on the peel, and there are those potatoes that I had to wash. But we also need to pick 5 items from this list. So the way I'm going to do that is just cut these into strips. Just going to kind of fold and roll them up into little bundles like that, and into a jar. I don't know if you can hear my stomach rumbling. Of course, I haven't had breakfast yet. I'm going to do brunch in just a moment. But I think I'd like to find out what spices I'm going to get so that I can plan around that. Okay, so that's all of my flavouring and herb vouchers in there. Give them a really good shake up. I'm going to shake out 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Okay, so what we got is 1 tablespoon of curry paste, 1 tablespoon of Marmite, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of dried mixed herbs, and 1 teaspoon of chili flakes. So that's the flavouring things, plus obviously the onions and whatever else and salt I've got to work with this week. So 1 tablespoon of curry paste, 1 tablespoon of Marmite, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of mixed dried herbs, and 1 teaspoon of chili flakes. Okay, time to cook brunch. It occurred to me I should probably go through those carrots a bit more carefully and just pick out the ones I think need using today, and there are a few. I think that's violet root rot, I think that's called. Some of these carrots have got little purple splotches on them, and I don't think that's natural. Well, I don't think that's a natural feature of the carrot. I think that's actually something called violet root rot, and that one just looks a bit mushy and iffy there. So I'm going to make sure I use these 4 carrots today, and the rest of them can go back in the bag in the fridge. There was another one there that's a bit soft on the end. Okay, so I've got to make something with potatoes, an onion, and carrots. I think I'm just going to make a kind of sausage and vegetable stew type of thing. Going to need some fat and a tiny bit of protein, so I'm going to use one of my sausages. Flavour in this is largely going to come from the onion, and I'm going to minimise waste by keeping the onion skins and top and tail, because I'll probably use that in stock later. So don't worry about that little bit of onion being wasted. It's not being wasted. Yeah, this onion, just you can tell when I'm cutting it that it's perfectly okay, but it wouldn't have lasted much longer. There's just something about onions you can tell when you cut them. And also the skin there, you can see that that skin is a bit moist, and that wouldn't have lasted more than another day or so. Now what I might do is cook all of those potatoes and have some leftovers, because I can always incorporate leftovers into something else tomorrow or later today. I am going to scrupulously weigh all of the ingredients that I put in here so that we can try and calculate a more accurate nutrition analysis. So this onion, for example, is 131 grams of onion. I will write that down. Now some parts of these carrots are a little bit kind of iffy. There, I think that's violet root rot. I'm just going to peel those bits off. And ordinarily, I might just scrub carrots, but I think what I'll do this time is we'll just peel the good parts of the skin into the stock box. And again, that middle of that carrot there is just not serviceable. So that's going to go, that part is going to go in the compost. There's not quite as much fat coming out of this sausage as I anticipated there would be, which is interesting. So I am going to have to use a little bit of my lard just to get things moving in here. So there's about 5 grams of lard going in. And now I can get the onions frying. So I'm just going to chop these carrots up into kind of, I don't know, chunks, batons, and I'm going to put those in there as well with the onions so that they can take a little bit of colour, maybe caramelise a tiny bit, because that will just help with the flavour. So I can already tell this is going to cook way more than I need for this one meal, because I haven't even put the potatoes in there yet. Since I have such a lot of it, I'm going to use some swede in here as well. I'm rethinking this dish as I'm making it, because I think I'm going to cook to make leftovers here. I think I'm actually going to deliberately cook all of these potatoes, even though it's more than I will eat in a sitting, just so that I can create some leftovers that I can use in future dishes. I'm just going to take about that much of it. So I'm just going to save the peels from this again. They're going to go in the stock pot, peeling it quite thinly so I don't waste any nutrition. I'm going to dice it fairly small because in my experience swede takes a bit longer to cook than carrots. Also, as a kind of turnip-like vegetable, it's going to donate a bit of flavour to the dish, so cutting it small allows it to do that more effectively. So, swede in as well. Now's a good time to add a little bit of salt. That will help draw some moisture out of those onions. And I think these potatoes are pretty good. I am just going to double check them over because there was something weird going on. Now the little ones like that are just going to go in whole. I'll pick those out first. Anything up to about that size is just going to go in the stew whole. Anything bigger than that is going to get cut into pieces about the same size as those potatoes, those whole potatoes. Okay, I'm going to use half of my teaspoon of mixed dried herbs in this. There we go, 1 level teaspoon of herbs, a little bit less than that I think probably. I'm going to measure that into this little dish, use about half of it, and I will reserve the rest of this for something else. Potatoes in. I'm just going to take the sausage out and then enough water to cover these vegetables. Okay, that can go back in the top of the stew. Just to thicken this up a little bit, I'm going to throw in about a heaped teaspoonful of flour. Probably not the best time to do that. I probably should have done that with the fat earlier. It's going to make lumps, but actually as we continue to simmer, those lumps are going to cook out and thicken up the broth. Don't worry about how that looks. And then just as that stew is finishing up, the potatoes are very nearly done now. I've just got the 2 outer leaves of the cabbage. I'll take out the midrib because that takes a little bit longer to cook. Probably what I'll do, actually some of those bits there will go to the stock pot. These bits of midrib, I'm going to slice them really, really thin and throw them in now. And they're still going to be very crisp when we serve up. So that's going to go in the pot now. That was a good cabbage considering it was in the reduced box. Shred down into nice little pieces. And that's going to go in about 2 minutes before the end of cooking, just so it gets a bit of steaming, but it won't lose all of its colour. Everything's nearly done there, and I'm just going to now cook that just a little bit more, just literally until that cabbage wilts. And then we'll serve. Okay then, so day 1 brunch, hearty vegetable stew with sausage. And you can see a lot of that liquid has gone, but what's left is now thickened up nicely. I'm probably going to aim to try to get all of the pieces of sausage here, just so that my leftovers are mostly vegetables, just because of what I'm thinking about what I might do next. Okay, pepper at the table is permitted in seasoning quantities, and I might have salt on standby just in case it needs a bit more seasoning. I think this is going to need to cool down before I eat it. I don't think there'll be any massive surprises here because all of the ingredients that went in here are kind of predictable. Need a bit more salt. Yeah, that's pretty good. So yeah, although I don't think we'd have succeeded in keeping those potatoes for much longer, there was nothing wrong with them as they stood at the moment. And that broth, considering that's just made from the caramelisation on the onions and carrots and a little bit of the sausage, and salt and water and flour, it's really quite robust. So there's easily enough here for me to fill up my bowl a second time. And still, I reckon there's 3 big servings. Enough there for leftovers. I'm going to save that. We'll think of something to do with that later. Happy with that. That was really nice and filling and hearty and warming. So now I think I've just got to sit down and kind of do a little bit of a meal plan for the week and think about the ingredients I've got so that I don't underuse them or run out. I don't know if it's possible to make a sourdough starter using self-raising flour. So let's find out. Very small scale experiment here, and we won't know whether this is working until later in the week. So 2 tablespoons of flour and just enough water to make that into a kind of wet dough. Now obviously that is going to fizz up now because it's self-raising flour. So I'm expecting that the cream of tartar and the baking powder in there will react and it'll fizz up a little bit. But hopefully we'll get a sourdough yeast starter growing in there. We won't know until a day or two, and leave that out and see if we do get a sourdough starter forming in there. Another thing to get a head start on is these yellow split peas. Now I happen to know these take a long time to cook. I'm going to cook some in the slow cooker as a kind of standby ingredient. I'm going to use my cumin, I think, and cook these to make a kind of almost like a dal. So I've got 150 grams of yellow split peas. So that's going to go in the slow cooker. And again, I'll save all the trimmings and those will go into the stock pot. It's surprising how much flavour and colour will come out of just a few little bits of dry brown onion skin. It's certainly clean enough, and it's going to be obviously simmered for hours and hours anyway, so if there were bacteria or anything on there to worry about, those are going to get cooked. I must say it is nice to be able to have baking fat on hand. In previous iterations I've had to try and wring it out of the bacon or whatever. It's nice to be able to just have a block of fat that we can just call on. And then really just for a bit of kind of substance and colour in the dish I'm cooking, I'm going to grate up a big carrot. Okay, and carrot top and tail, you know the story by now. Grated carrot into the slow cooker, and it seems like a lot, but that's going to cook right down. My teaspoonful of cumin is going to go into this dish. Oh, come on. 1 teaspoon of cumin. Not going to put any salt in there at the moment. Some people say salt makes beans and peas cook more firmly or take longer to cook, so it doesn't really matter. I'll put some salt in at the end. These onions are starting to caramelise a bit now, which is good. So onions are just going to go in there on top, and then I've got to top that off with water and put it on the slow cooker and cook it for a few hours until the peas are completely tender. I'm not going to waste the caramelisation that's on the pan there. I will deglaze that with a bit of water. Okay, so that's the water from the deglaze, and we'll add some more water and cook those for a few hours. Only a couple of hours, and those split peas have cooked down actually quicker than I thought. Sometimes I've cooked them for a couple of hours and they've still been like bullets, but these appear to have gone nice and tender. Need some seasoning, so good pinch of salt in there. Fortunately, we do have unlimited salt in this challenge. That's good. So I'm going to turn that off, let that cool down. Moisture will continue to soak into those peas. So I'm just going to take Eva to the park for some exercise. Well, exercise for me too. But let's go play Here's What You Could Have Foraged. Just give me the ball. I can't throw it till you drop it. Now it's a little bit early in the year for stinging nettles, but there are places where there's a kind of a little bit of a microclimate where the nettles have come up a little bit early. This is not one of them. Actually, this is what nettles typically look like in January. But there will be places where it's a little bit warmer, maybe a little bit gets a bit more sunshine, and the nettles have made more of a start. We could have foraged stinging nettles, and they are really good nutrition actually. They are a source of all of the essential amino acids. Well, I think you probably have to eat a lot of them to be able to get enough nutrition directly from them, but nevertheless they are a good thing that you can forage if you're lucky at this time of year. The other thing we might find is on the brambles, again probably in some of the warmer little microclimates, we might find some of the buds. There's one there. So there's a growth bud for brambles, and you can just pick those off and eat them directly off the plant. Not an awful lot of nourishment in them, but they taste okay, and actually if you gathered up enough of them they could be used to make a sort of tea type of infusion. So yeah, there's another one there, the little bramble buds, a bit small at this time of year, but if you find a plant that's in a warm south facing aspect, sometimes you'll find it's a little bit further on than the other ones. So here are some nettles that are a bit further along. Still wouldn't have picked them from there. I'm probably not going to find the sort of places where I would pick them from, because obviously I'm not foraging on this challenge, so I'm not going to go everywhere looking for them. Just really trying to give you an idea. There's a patch of nettles that's a little bit further along. There might be some good bits there that could be picked. There are other spring greenery type of things around, so there's some dock there, and if we look far enough we'll find some dandelion leaves, probably bitter at this time of year if they're not in active growth, but you know, they could be added to a salad or something. There are even some small shoots of hogweed there, so regular hogweed, not giant hogweed, so those could be had. But then not on this trip, but on an earlier walk out with Eva at the weekend, there was the option of foraging some venison. Unfortunately, a deer was killed on the road, just down the road from where I live, and as long as the health and safety and legal pitfalls can be navigated, and they can be navigated, there's enough venison there to live like a king, literally. But I figure that a certain portion of the audience would not want to see me inexpertly butcher a roadkill deer, and I think that would just 15 kilos of venison in the freezer would not be much of a challenge, would it? Here's another one. It's not strictly foraging because that's somebody's garden hedge. That's rosemary there, but I suspect if we asked nicely, especially if they were out gardening and we paid them a compliment on the quality of their garden, they might let us pick a sprig or two of rosemary, so that's a thing we could forage. And there are, in the hedge by the doctor's surgery here, still a few apples that have survived the winter so far and are far enough in the hedge that they don't need to be worried about the whole dog wee thing. But there we go, so we could have had some apples there. Probably not great, but they are there. Next on, here's what you could have foraged: crab apples. A bit worse for wear. In fact, they may actually be too far gone. Although actually, when they're like this, let's just have a look. When they're like this is what they sometimes call bletted, where they've ripened to the point of being actually probably quite sweet inside. Certainly, they smell very appley. Smell actually mildly alcoholic, so it's possible that they have actually fermented a bit on the tree. But anyway, there are probably a few crab apples that could be had there. Maybe they'd be only useful for making a bit of tea or something like that. And then last but not least, this is Rome hawthorn, which has fruits that persist on the tree until well into the winter. So there's a few things I could pick there. They are often, if they're picked earlier in the year, a bit bitter, but actually now they've had the frost on them, I wouldn't be surprised if these are actually quite sweet. I'm not going to taste one. Well, I suppose I could have a... I'm going to taste, but without eating. Yeah, there's no bitterness at all there. Not a lot of flavour. Flavour is kind of like a bland flavoured apple, but there's some carbohydrate in there. So to go with that kind of fake dal that I've made, I'm going to cook some rice. And I think again I'm going to cook with a view to creating leftovers. So one of these little cups of rice is normally enough for 2 people once it's cooked. So I'm going to go for that. Let's have a look and see how much rice that actually is. So yeah, it's about 200 grams of rice. And that's normally enough for 2 people. For once, the rice bag didn't split wide open. Now, I don't always wash rice because sometimes I actually prefer the surface starch to stick the rice together. But I'm intending to fry some of this rice, so I'm going to wash off that starch. It's a shame because I am washing calories down the sink, literally here. Rice and other grains in the UK, I don't find that they typically need washing for hygiene reasons. They're normally really, really clean. And we're going to be using the absorption method here, so 2 of these cups of water to 1 cup of rice, basically twice the volume of water to rice. And then we'll just bring that to the boil and simmer until all of that water is absorbed. Now it's kind of remarkable how just a little douse in ice cold water will bring lettuce back to life. It has actually crisped up, it's firmed up. So I guess it wasn't too far gone. It is just a plant after all, and plants need water. I don't know if it's worth putting those in the stock box or not, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to shred this into nice fine ribbons. You can actually cook lettuce, there's no reason why you can't, it's just a vegetable. And it's a bit like spinach when it's cooked like that. There's a good lot of lettuce there actually, that's good. So this split pea stuff, I'm going to set aside approximately half of it. And the other half is for my meal today. That rice is quite close to done now. Just need to cook it until there's no moisture left visible. About another minute. So half of that rice I'm going to cool down quickly and we'll chill it and we'll use that in a future dish. The other half I'm going to eat today. And you can reheat rice quite safely as long as it's quickly cooled and chilled and used within a day or 2. And then the lettuce is going to go into the rice pan. And the idea here is to let that wilt down in the heat of the rice there, just a little bit. So I'm just going to stir it together. Probably not enough space in there to do this, but just going to stir that together into the rice. Right, let's dish up this weird meal. I have no idea if this is going to be nice, but we'll find out, won't we? Possibly the strangest meal I've cooked on one of these budget challenges. Let's go and give it a taste. All right. Well, I know it's going to need salt, and I'll assume it's going to need pepper. Here goes, and I will give you my honest opinion on this. Surprisingly okay. There's something about warming lettuce like this that brings out almost like a fragrance in it. Those peas do need a fair bit of salt with them. So yeah, that was interesting. Weird, but surprisingly tasty and very filling and satisfying. Nutritional analysis is on the screen right now, including whether or not we made the targets. And I think that's it for this video. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for day 2.